Could you give me your name and your job title, please?
My name is Adam Zwar. I guess I'm an actor, writer, producer, and I've just written a book called 12 Summers.
We'll get to your book, don't worry. But the interesting thing about your book is that it's a memoir sort of told through cricket. And I didn't know. I mean, I know about your writing and your comedy and those and the documentaries and all those sorts of things later on. I didn't realize at one stage your job was, from what I could tell in the book, annoying famous musicians like Sting and Billy Idol. That's an incredible way of starting.
Yeah, it was an interesting time in my life because I wanted to get into journalism, but I didn't. I realized very early on I didn't have the aptitude for that foot in the door stuff. I wasn't very good at the crime stuff. I didn't really care about crime. All the stuff that in the 90s that journalism was interested in, I wasn't interested in. I was interested in just interviewing celebrities. I don't know why. It was just a soft gig. It was just a conversation. It was like soft feature articles. That was my beat. And so I became a little bit of a. I had an aptitude for it. I didn't piss them off for some reason. So that's why I guess I continued doing it. I kept getting gigs. And then by the time, I think it's 2001, Rupert Murdoch sent a directive to everyone at News Limited, as it was called then. More celebrity stories, less crime. And like, if I'd stayed on and if my career hadn't transitioned into filmmaking, I would have been, that was my time would have come. So I was essentially through the 90s just a pariah at the Sunday Herald Sun, the inconsequential guy just interviewing Barry White and Sting and going on junkets with AC/DC. But had I stayed on, I think I would have been on the big bucks, which is very small in journalism.
In your book, you actually talk about an article that I'm positive I read, which was you did something I like so much because I kind of did this in my cricket sort of career a little bit as well, where you contacted Kwan from Regurgitator, who was like, you'd grown up with him, but you hadn't seen him in like 30 years. I remember, like, I did a similar thing. I'm not going to name the cricketers, but there's a couple of cricketers who I knew a little bit, and then as we got older, it was like, mate, I need this, this favor, and they're like, okay, yeah, I sort of remember you from that.
Who are the cricketers?
I'm not going to name Ed Joyce there, but there's been a couple of cricketers who've come along. Okay. Again, you know what I mean? Like, they're not even that famous. They're just famous enough that they can help you later on, but you have to remind them who you are first.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think Jimmy Mara, I had to remind him who I was. So Kwan, I really wanted to write for the Sunday magazine. It was a new magazine, and you got paid, I think, 3 times or 4 times as much as you would for writing for the paper, right? So for some reason, when your words go on the glossy paper, your fee goes up exponentially. And so the new editor of the magazine, she was English, and she just wanted to employ English writers. But I was kind of relentless. I just kept pitching her stories, and then I said, okay, what about Regurgitator? She said, I'm not interested in Regurgitator. I said, I grew up with Kwan, the lead singer from Regurgitator. It'd be a nice story. And she went, okay, in the story, he needs to admit that he knew you and you were friends. You just can't make this up, Adam. It can't be just you in the kind of narration saying, we were friends. So I went along I arranged an interview with the record company, met Kwan, and he didn't know who I was. And I'm just going through the paces of the interview and knowing that I wasn't going to get paid and my career as a magazine writer was over. And then at the end he went, you Adam Zwar? And I said, yeah. He goes, look at photos of you at home. You used to have red hair and freckles, right? And I went, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I remember you. Yeah, I'm sorry, man, I blocked out a whole period of my life, And suddenly I now had a career as a magazine writer, so it was good. But yeah, thank you, Kwan.
I love that. How much cricket are you watching at this period? Like, you're obviously writing these features. Sometimes you're off, getting drunk with rock stars and whatever, and traveling around and doing all the sorts of weird things. But how much cricket were you watching? Let's say before the '99 World Cup.
So every summer I'm watching cricket. It was, remember in those days it was before Foxtel, so you really didn't get much of you get the Ashes, but you wouldn't get much overseas cricket. You wouldn't get a tour of Pakistan or or
I think we started getting West Indies and India occasionally in that period, didn't we?
Yeah. So I would be watching all the Australian summers, and I watched obviously the tragedy of the '96 World Cup, and then but it wasn't like I do recall sneaking into the Herald Sun offices and watching the famous 2001 series in India. You know, that was the big time, and that was when Foxtel's ratings just went through the roof with that series. It became almost a going concern. They got huge subscriptions. But my recollections, I mean, you'd have to remind me, but, you know, obviously the 96 World Cup, I remember the 99 tour of the West Indies vividly, and I remember Warne being dropped for that fourth test, and I distinctly remember that footage of him in the warm-ups before the fourth test. I think Robert Linders posted it where he's just ambling through the witches' hats. You know when those people walk across as like the zebra crossing, and they're trying to do the right thing by saying, "Yeah, I am hurrying," and they move their arms, but their legs are they're just normally walking. Well, that was what Warne was doing. He was just like pretending to run, but his legs were walking. He looked like the saddest man in the world, and so I remember that series vividly, and then going into the 99 World Cup, and I remember that. I remember seeing us play Scotland because a former school friend of mine was I think he's on the outskirts of the Scottish team. His name was Peter Steindl. He was a few years above me at school, and so I was like hoping he'd play, but I don't think he played. But I remember us being very lackluster in that game and being worried. I should have been worried.
You covered that World Cup quite well in the book, and that's the chapter that we're going to be chatting about. But so you just talked about the Shane Warne acting. You also talked about the thing that I'd forgotten about, which was the booze ban, where they said that the players couldn't drink. But then the other thing, which I love especially now when you think about Moneyball, what a weird thing this was. They decided not to have Glenn McGrath take the new ball, and they copied Alan Donald. But the thing is that kind of everyone knew that Alan Donald wasn't taking the new ball because he couldn't control it. He needed the slightly older ball. Yeah. Even for Warwickshire, like they didn't, they would get him to bowl first change. Glenn McGrath could control pretty much any ball that had ever been, invented. Right. It was a very weird start to that World Cup. Shane Warne was still angry. There was no alcohol. And Glenn McGrath, probably the greatest modern new ball bowler, wasn't using the new ball.
Well, yeah, 100%. I think there was I think I'd like to add the word curfew too.
Curfew.
Yeah. So the genesis of the booze ban was the '96 World Cup. Well, of course, when we got the get out of jail semi-final against the West Indies, which is still remarkable how we won that. In the same way that '99 semi-final is remarkable, it's almost like the hand of God for both those matches. So 96 World Cup semi-final, the guys just get on the piss. As Damien Fleming says, we got out of jail. And by the way, do you remember that final ball to Courtney Walsh that Damien Fleming bowled? It was just a perfect ball. I think it hit the top of off or top of middle. But Fleming reckons he got it wrong. He meant to bowl somewhere else. But anyway, I just thought it was amazing. They shouldn't kind of do this reflective history, should they? They should just leave them kind of romance with us. So they got on the piss in a huge way. And then they went to Lahore for the final. And they trained during the day. And Sri Lanka trained at night. And therefore Sri Lanka were able to see the heavy dew that was falling on the ground at night. And of course, Mark Taylor and the Australian team had no idea about this dew. So the thing you do is when you win the toss is you field first, and Tubby won the toss and bowled, and then you just saw Warne, the greatest fucking leg spinner ever, just not being able to control the ball at all, and I think he and Mark Ward just got smashed, and they were like. I don't know. I'm going to guess here, but there were several drop catches. So we that was and then at the end, the Pakistani Prime Minister didn't shake Mark Taylor's hand because I think it was a religious thing. So it was just a horrible day for the Australians, and there was problems between Simpson and Taylor, and then you saw Bob Simpson leave. So all of that was the intelligence they brought into the '99 World Cup. Don't get pissed, and we're all pretty straight-laced. And then they decided to plagiarize the Alan Donald thing, and so we'll also bowl our spearhead at first change, So, so the booze ban and doing that just didn't work, surprisingly.
Well, I mean, when I talk to people now, people say, what's the weirdest thing you've seen in cricket? It's like Adam Dale opening the bowling in a World Cup ahead of Glenn McGrath would have to be up there. So I don't know if you know the full Adam Dale story, but this is my memory. And I used to play golf with someone who, like his father-in-law or something. If my memory serves correct, he was a Nike executive who worked in Melbourne and was playing club cricket in Melbourne and got a gig working for Nike in Queensland, moved up to Queensland, started taking all those wickets and ended up. And it's like, no disrespect to Adam Dale, because what a career to be able to turn that around and play for Australia. But he's not quite Glenn McGrath. And
no.
It's remarkable. So they got rid of they lost. They beat Scotland just and they didn't play
it was terrible.
Well. Yeah,
what was that?
They lost to New Zealand and Pakistan, didn't they? They the first.
Yeah. So the New Zealand game was a comfortable loss, but the Pakistan loss, I remember the Akram just getting huge reverse swing, and I just remember thinking, so those two losses in a row, I remember the Pakistan thinking, we've got no chance. And so then, because it's particularly Akram, who just had the ball on a string that day. It was just terrifying, and particularly to the left-handers. And then, of course, the booze ban was gazumped. Tom Moody, who had played in the 87 World Cup, 92 World Cup, didn't play in the 96 World Cup, but was brought in the 99 World Cup to be kind of a Waugh's right-hand man and kind of person to lean on. Wasn't really brought in to actually play, but then he played in this game. He played in the next game.
Did he replace Brent? I thought they started with Brendan Julian, didn't they? Was it Brendan Julian? I think he was the other all-rounder in that squad. Yeah, and my memory is that I think they just thought, well, Tom Moody's got a lower ceiling, but also a lower floor. And as you said, he knew the England conditions better than most of them because he was an absolute pro in English conditions.
Yeah.
And, he was going to bowl. He's fine. He's 6'6", 6'7". He's going to hit a spot.
Yeah.
And he can bat. And it was I always felt like it was that kind of decision of, Brendan Julian could give us anything, but we could also lose a bunch of games with him. Or whoever the all-rounder was. I thought it was Julian. Because I think that was before Harvey. Well, it certainly wasn't Harvey, and I don't think it was Simons either. So I think that was the end of the sort of Brendan Julian era. But that Moody, just that safe pair of hands. It's incredible to think that he played in that many World Cups, because when you say he played in all those World Cups, he didn't actually play that many one-days. He was in and out of the side.
No, he was like a World Cup specialist. So I think we lost against Pakistan. So isn't it funny how your mind plays tricks on you? But we only lost by 10 runs. And then we played Bangladesh. So we had to win every game after that. Yeah. So the booze ban was relaxed. Moody was brought into the team, and we had to win every game. So the next game was against Bangladesh. We won, and then West Indies, which we won. And then it went into this kind of strange, I don't know if you remember it, but that strange kind of thing called the Super Six. Where it was
No, sorry, you go.
Oh, it was a round robin thing where the kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 teams who got into the next stage all played each other.
Yeah, so they had that for 99, 2003, and 2007, I think, as well.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then, obviously, I can't even remember if they had it for 2011. I can't remember if it had disappeared. But yeah, it's because, weirdly, I don't know where the idea came from, because usually things would come from another sport, like for instance, if you have a look, this is one of my favourite facts ever. The IPL has a preliminary final because it's stolen from rugby league and Aussie rules, right?
Yeah.
And you sort of know where these things come from, and it's like Super Sixes. As far as it just sort of happened, and we all had to try and work out what it was, and it was like a quarterfinals with 2 less teams, where it was also a round robin.
That's right, and also I think run rates were still brought in, so what you did in the original game was still brought into the Super 6, right? So we still had to win everything. And then there was that, and we did. And so we beat India, we beat Zimbabwe, and then, sorry, it's kind of a round robin. So you played 4 matches in the Super 6. And then the last one, which we needed to win, was against South Africa. And that's, of course, I think I say this in the book, that became the greatest game, the greatest limited overs game that would of all time, which would then be surpassed a week later.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the South African games are so good that people forget that might have also been the height of Zimbabwe cricket. Like Neil Johnson
I know. Yeah.
played that incredible. I remember I was such a Neil Johnson fan at that stage. I was heartbroken when I found out he was actually a South African who just turned up for Zimbabwe for that tournament. But like he didn't have this long career, right? That was it. It was like he came in and you're like, this guy can bowl okay. This guy can smash the ball. What's he going to be like? And we just never really saw him again. And that was also the end of that sort of... Like by the next World Cup, Zimbabwe I don't think they went anywhere. And then obviously all their problems since with the black armbands and getting banned from Test cricket. Like that was it. The 99 period was when they were good at Test cricket and when they were good at one-day cricket. And my memory is that Neil Johnson, well, he certainly made a lot of runs. I think he made 100. And there was that point where it's like, is some bloke that no one in Australia has ever heard of going to stop Australia from winning this World Cup? Before they, obviously, I think they won quite easily in that game in the end. But you're right. It's obviously about South Africa because that becomes the biggest thing.
Can I just throw that Zimbabwe team? It reminds me. I've got to be really weird here. It reminds me of the '95 Brisbane Bears team that was Robert Walls coached. They should have they probably were the second best team. That year, from Carlton was the first, but they got knocked out by Carlton in the first round of the finals. I remember thinking that was because I'm a Carlton fan. That was our toughest game, and no one ever remembers them. No one remembers they were a good team. Zimbabwe. That was the height of Zimbabwean cricket, and we would never see the likes of that again. It's a shame they didn't go on. Now I think about it.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no doubt. It's I remember having a conversation with a cricket writer once, and I said that every team that had sort of become a test-playing nation had given us something. And he's like, "What about Zimbabwe?" And I said, "Me and all my friends had Zimbabwe shirts in the late '90s. Like, we absolutely loved that team. It was such a that was in the days when you could go to Rebel and you could get the opposition the shirts and everything. These days it costs $200 to get like an Australian shirt, but in those days you could get everything. So they get past the Zimbabwe game.
Oh, but Neil Johnson 132 and 2 for 43 in that game, by the way, against Australia, which we won by 44 runs.
Yeah, we ended up winning it quite easily. I'm going to give you a better detail than how many runs he made. I'm pretty sure he batted in a red floppy hat, like the Richard.
That's he did. Yes, I remember that.
Just every detail of what he did was just absolutely great. So I'm pretty sure I got this from your book because I don't think I looked it up. South Africa were the dominant ODI team between the 96 World Cup and the 99 one. They had 57 wins and 16 losses. I think that this is obviously before they were known as chokers, and they were looking like they were going to be this rising superpower of world cricket at that point. And the other thing is that Lance Klusener is in that side, and I would say that he had the best single World Cup of any player probably ever in 99. I mean, I'm just going to read you some stats because it's so much fun. In 9 games, he averaged 140 with the bat while striking 122. Just for those listening at home, in 1999, we didn't even understand any of these numbers. And that was a low batting tournament as well. Almost no one made any runs. The average strike rate in that tournament was 65. So he was double what a normal batter was. And he was a frontline bowler. He took 17 wickets at 21. So he did absolutely brilliant with bat and with ball. And he changed cricket because Ricky Ponting told me that was the first time they ever saw range hitting. The Australians turned up in one game. It might have even been the first semi-final. They turned up in one game, and he was out in the middle, and someone was lobbing him slow balls, and he was hitting them out the park. The first thing was, oh my God, how hard does this guy hit it? And the second thing was, what's he doing? That's not a throwdown. That's not bowling. He's just hitting it as far as he can.
So the backstory was he was injured. for a long time there, and so he couldn't bowl, so he just spent his time in the nets batting. And he said, I decided not to work on my weaknesses, defence, and work on my strengths, which is just slogging. So he'd just be in the net slogging all the time, slogging. So surprisingly enough, when 99 World Cup turned around, he was actually good at slogging, and he hit the ball so hard. And I say this in the book, so I don't want to repeat myself, but if it went a metre either side of you, you wouldn't have got it. And Paul Rifle had a pretty good pair of hands. He just hit straight through them. Anyway, we'll get to that. I guess we're still in the Super Sixes, aren't we? We've got to do that. You dropped the World Cup game.
Exactly. We haven't even got that far. But I wanted to build up how good South Africa had become, and Lance Klusener, and it was kind of everywhere that we're I think that's where South Africa was going at that point. We've already talked about Alan Donald as well. Like, they had this phenomenal team. You mentioned this, and I think it's quite fair. Australia struggled in that first game against South Africa, and Steve Waugh did something that I still find remarkable to this day. He basically started sledging the bowlers, and you and I both grew up in Australia, and I played in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. Where I played, that was quite common, right? There was quite often an angry player, but you didn't see it really at international level. Even by Shield level, you might get Greg Matthews occasionally mouthing off to a bowler. But even by the time those guys got to Shield level, they'd shut up a little bit. Steve Waugh was doing what a guy playing for Hadfield Fourths would do.
Yeah, you said to Cronje, I'm taking you down today. And, I mean, of course, it kind of stands to reason that, Cronje being such an earnest person that, you could get under his skin. Waugh picked him. What an interesting. So I think I'll just go to the scorecard because so South Africa, I think, I know they made 271 for 7.
Which is a very good score, definitely above par.
Yeah, I mean, that batting order you talked about is so Kirsten and Gibbs openers. My God, Daryl Cullinan. Oh well, that's an asterisk because of Warne. Cronje, Rhodes, Klusener, Pollock, Boucher. That's it. They're your batters. And so now Waugh to this game, before this game, had just had a spectacular tournament. I can't remember how many centuries he made, but he'd been batting really well, and Gilchrist had been batting well as well. And so Australia were immediately on the back foot because Waugh was run out for 5 and Gilchrist was bowled for 5. And so we're all immediately kind of going, oh, fuck. And then Pondy comes in, 69. Damien Martin, Mr. Inconsistency. Just this amazing player who sometimes does really well and sometimes just doesn't. Got 11. And so so at this stage when Waugh comes in, we're 4 for 100. No, we're 3 for 48.
Yeah, it was early, wasn't it?
He
came in at 5, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
And 271 in that tournament, it'd be interesting to go back and see the scores, but the 2 leading wicket takers in that tournament, Shane Warne, do you remember the other one?
No.
I'm pretty sure, I hope I'm going to get the name right, but it was New Zealand's Jeff Allett, the left-arm seam bowler, who I think him and Warne took the most wickets. It was, if you could swing the ball that summer, you were almost impossible to play. If you look at the World Cup, a generation later in England, even though the ball still dominated a little bit, it was like that was a pretty easy tournament to bat in. That 99 tournament, it was like you could easily be 3 for 50 in every game because the ball was just nipping around everywhere. I mean, the perfect example is that Alan Donald couldn't control it. It was swinging so much. In that era, and so. I think for Steve Waugh, that's almost like a perfect situation because that almost made it more like Test cricket.
Yeah.
Because if it was a shootout, Steve Waugh's probably, especially by 99, he probably didn't have the power and the game that he did when he was younger. But by that point, it's like, okay, it's nipping around a little bit. I've got to take a bunch of singles and get under the skin of the opposition. That's a Steve Waugh type of game, isn't it?
That's you perfectly said, I think. Yeah, he literally he came out and he had that kind of Clint Eastwood grimace that he had, and he was pretty much in the zone, from the moment he walked out, and so his partner at that stage was Ponting. Ponting hung around for a while. Well, actually, they made 120 partnerships, so yeah, more than a while. And then his partner was Bevan. But what was he on when he clipped that ball to Gibbs? Was it 50
that is a good question. Yeah, he must have just been after he was 50, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then, so I'll let you explain it because you've done the full research on the language in the book, which I always forget. What did Steve Waugh say? Do you remember?
Oh God, I've got to look that. I got to look the.
I can say I've got it here. I've got you.
Oh, you got it there? Yeah.
So it said, "Hey Herschel, do you realise you've just cost your team the match?" Which of course becomes, "You just dropped the World Cup."
It's such a interesting thing because I work in television comedy where there's basically people write a script and then what happens is you get it punched up, and punch up is where you just write better version alts. You'll get about 4 or 5 people to look at the script and they'll do alts and toppers. And an alt is where you cross out the original joke and you make it better or tighter, and a topper is you add another joke to it, and you add another joke to the original joke. So that is a perfect alt. By the time the guys in the men and women of the press did a job on it, it became you dropped the World Cup. So yeah, and it again, just go with it, Steve. Why are you telling everyone the truth?
So that whole thing, I want to talk about this because it's really interesting, and you go into the full story. So in the team meeting, Shane Warne says, "Just be careful with Herschel. He tries to flick the ball up after he's taken a catch, and just wait when you."
Yeah, and everyone treats him like. By this stage, it's important to know. So I mentioned before the '99 fourth test in the West Indies where he was dropped. So he goes to the '99 World Cup and he's sulking. His wife's about to have their first child. He's bowling not well. Remember, we say he's bowling not well, and he says he shouldn't have been dropped. The guy shouldn't have been playing. I mean, he just had a shoulder operation. The surgeon said you won't bowl again, right? And here he is bowling Test cricket, bowling in the West Indies, and he's not getting any purchase. And but maybe by the World Cup, it's kind of recovered enough to bowl well. But he's sulking. He's got the SADS, and he's pissing everyone off a bit. And I think it was before the Super Six game, the Super Sixes. He goes. The team has a walk through Hyde Park, and that's when Waugh and Warne have their heart to heart, and that's when I think Waugh at this stage has diagnosed the fact that you need to big Warne up, you need to tell him he's the greatest, and you constantly need to just say how wonderful you are, and this is what you can do, and we can't do this without you, kind of thing. And it does the job. And also, Moody gets everyone else to do it as well. Just subtly, everyone else is just going around saying, come on, Warnie. But he was still a little bit of a kind of a liability among the team. So when this team meeting happened and Warne at the end of it said, hey, guys, stand your ground when you hit a catch to Herschel, because he's a skylark and he tries to flick it up in the air really quickly. So he's going to lose. There's a chance he's going to lose control of the ball. No, in the two kind of retellings of that story from Damien Fleming and Steve Waugh, both of them kind of that no one really gave a shit. No one. Yeah. Thanks, Warnie. Whatever, mate. And then, of course, we were saying before, Waugh's in his 50s in that spectacular final Super Sixes game. He flicks it to Herschel. Herschel takes the catch and immediately before controlling it, flicks it up and it just falls out of his hand. And there's it's not out. At no stage could you say he had control of the ball, but there is a kind of debate between David Garran and Tony Gregg in the commentary box where Greg says you could almost make a case that he caught that. And Gower says, Fred not. And so after that, instead of going, oh, that was close, that Waugh, he just doubled down in his kind of aggression. And oh my God, it's the greatest rearguard innings in the history of Australian cricket.
And it was one-handed as well. I know that it's not like the tail fell apart, but like you go forward to the 2003 World Cup, and Michael Bevan's at the heart of kind of all of those sort of rear guards. But we haven't. The thing is, I think you mentioned Bevan briefly there, but again, you've got one of these a bit like Lance Klusener, not remembered as much now as he should have been, but was at the time was the best one-day player in the world. But Steve Waugh just goes ballistic, and I said he didn't have as much power. I mean, and I'm probably basing it on back in the 80s when he used to whack the ball a lot more. Yeah. But he scored it more than a run of ball in that chase, right?
Yeah,
and I'm sure I don't think anyone else for Australia did.
No. So Ponting 69 of 110. Steve Waugh 120 of 110. Bevan 27 of 33, and the closest after that was Moody 15 of 16. So yeah, I mean, I remember. I don't know if you remember this, but maybe I saw it beforehand, but I hadn't really seen Waugh's like that slog that he. I don't know. Did he call it I don't know
slog sweep.
Slog sweep. Yeah. I hadn't really seen it before. I'm not sure but he did it a bit in that game.
I think he's basically, I don't know if he invented it, but he's certainly the person who made it popular. But I reckon it was probably, I reckon he did it a little bit this is when we need Dan Brediger on, but I reckon he did it a little bit in 98. But from that point forward in his one-day career, even in his test career, he started playing it, right? Like if he got a spinner and he was struggling a little bit, he'd just get down on the knee. And it seems like such a logical shot now, but outside of drunk blokes in club cricket, it wasn't really a shot that you played, unless you're a tail ender. And so to see him do it, and also how controlled he was, right? Like like he knows exactly where it's going. It felt like every time he got down on that knee, it went for 6, right? Like it was so controlled, and he was so on top of it. It was incredible. That whole thing was incredible. And the only thing I want to add to the whole Shane Warne thing, which I find hilarious, is I don't think it would have mattered in that situation if Steve Waugh had walked or not, because Herschel dropped the catch so early.
I know. You're right. But it does spoil the story if you take that out a little bit, because
True.
It's kind of that idiot savant thing that Warne's got, where he just says something remarkable. He's a kind of a predictor. He's a great predictor of the game, and he used to be, probably more than he is now. But he, it was one of those things where you go, oh, you're a bit of a clairvoyant. And we end up winning that game, by the way, with 2 balls to spare. So it was actually closer. It's actually closer than I thought.
I think because we had 5 wickets in hand. Moody was still there, and Waugh was still there. In the end, I don't remember the tension being like there was tension because it was the last over of a one-day game, but I don't remember it being anyone thinking that somehow South Africa would pull that out. Or anything.
Yeah.
Like I felt like Australia had that because if Waugh was there, they were going to get there. So the great thing about this is that game, I'm trying to remember, was on was it the 13th or 14th of June? I've lost my dates on my notes. It was the 13th or 14th of June, and then the next game was on the 17th of June. So it was almost like a Champions League game where you play them, and in a couple of days you play them again. And this was a completely different kind of game. Like Australia batted first. Steve Waugh and Michael Bevan both made 50s, but Australia were bowled out for 213. Australia didn't put on a good total. They hadn't really put any pressure on. By 99, even in this low-scoring World Cup, 213, when, as you talked about before, Boucher was batting 9, wasn't he, I think, in this side? Like 8 or 9. Like, they had plenty of batting. 213 should not have been a problem for South Africa at all in that semi-final. Yeah,
100%. I've pulled up the wrong scorecard. Just hang tight. What? So obviously, what you were saying again, it was that 213 was made up of Waugh 56 and Bevan 65, and we were all out in the 49th over, well 50th over actually, and then you're up against this, as you say, Kirsten, Gibbs, Cullinan, Cronje, Callis, Rhodes, Pollock, Klusener, Boucher. So Boucher, yeah, you're dead right. 9. That guy could bat.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, when you go through this particular game, right? So Gilchrist and Mark Waugh, Ponting, all-time legends. Lehman, very famous player. Then you got Steve Waugh and Bevan. So test level, a test legend and a one-day legend. You got Moody, who's played in every single World Cup. And then Australia in their bowlers have Warne and McGrath. And then you go to the opposition, and it's, you've got Kirsten and Gibbs, so probably their best opener, and then Gibbs, who's probably underrated. In fact, Gibbs, if you take away the drop of catch of Steve Waugh and the match fixing that he didn't even go through with, probably gets remembered a lot more fondly. Darryl Cullinan, who could bat against everyone who wasn't Australia. Hanson Cronje, again, more famous for other things. Jux Callis is just slipped into this batting lineup, right?
I know.
And then you've got the world's best fielder behind him, Jonty Rhodes, Sean Pollock, who wasn't even the best all-rounder in that side because Callis and Klusener are in the side.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on until you get to Alan Donald. I don't know if we'll ever have that many games of one-day cricket where there's that much talent as there was in this. And the thing is that we're talking about the semi-final.
Yeah.
This is not the final. And it's this weird back-to-back game. And they're chasing 213. And Kirsten and Gibbs look in control, right? They're knocking the ball around like nothing is happening. And I'm thinking, what would I have been? I would have been 19, probably unemployed at the time, as I often was in those days, or, about to quit a job or whatever the situation was. And I'm staying up late going, oh my God, I'm going to stay up and watch South Africa beat us in the World Cup semi-final at that point. Yeah. And then enter Shane Warne, who, as you've already done the backstory, man, he felt he had the shoulder injury. He felt shunned by the team. He wasn't the Shane Warne that we knew. And then suddenly, South Africa just get mauled by him.
Waugh describes in his book. So when he brings on, I don't know when he brings on Warne quite early, and Warne, I think, takes the wicket of is it Kirsten first?
No, Gibbs. He got Gibbs with the big one, didn't he?
Yeah, but they talk about, Waugh talks about in his book how that first wicket that he got, all the players rushed to him, but he kept on running. And they were all trying to tackle him to just bring him under control. He just had so much strength. And he said that in his book that strength and power and kind of energy that Warne had, kind of, he was able to, in that moment, was able to pass it on to everybody else in the team, because everyone else in the team was feeling really low. At that point, South Africa were none for 48. So, it was the most, I mean, where do you start with his career? But you'd have to always put that up as the most, one of your favourite spells of Warne. It was he single-handedly, I mean, if Waugh won the game before, Warne won that game.
Yeah, so that he took 3 for 8. No, sorry. He took 3 wickets and 8 balls, didn't he? And I think they ran Cullinan out just afterwards as well. So it was 3 wickets in 8 balls, and the Gibbs ball is probably as good as the Gatting ball, except for the fact that we expected that from Warne by that point. I think that's I would argue the best ball he ever bowled was probably the one to Strauss.
I was going to say, yeah.
I think that's a better one than the Gatting one. But by the time that happens, my favourite thing about the Strauss one is he does a very similar thing to Gatting in that he keeps looking back at where the ball pitched and where it hit. Confused. And you're like, mate, you've had 12 years of watching this. By this stage, you should understand what he's going to do. But you still didn't. The Gibbs ball just opens Gibbs up. So, he just ends up on the wrong side of it, doesn't he? And it's like I remember watching it live just going, how do you play that? How does a batter just hit that ball?
It was spectacular. It almost makes me cry. But it's interesting. I do think with I just watched that Shane documentary, and I do think with poor old Gadding, he must kind of like want to underplay the Strauss ball so he can keep on going on documentaries and picking up a fee. He never shies away from it. I mean, it must be I've done, as a viewer, I've done these kind of documentaries in the past, and you end up having to pay him a fair bit of money to come on and talk about these things, particularly Gadding. I mean, I remember doing the Bodyline documentary, and we didn't have enough money to get DK to talk. Didn't have enough money for at that stage for Greg Chappell. We for the underarm documentary, we spent most of the budget on Chappell. It's kind of it's they're not cheap. When they're talking about those moments, so I think Gadding does make it. This is just a side note, everybody. I think Gadding does make it. He's got a very good side career going on talking about that.
With Gadding, if you interview him. So he had this really interesting career, but he doesn't like talking about some of the other things. So he broke the bed in a hotel. Yeah.
Yes.
He went on the Rebel Tour, which he really, really doesn't like talking about. Trust me, I've tried that 3 or 4 times with him.
Yeah, right.
And he played the reverse sweep in the '87 World Cup final.
The reverse sweep is probably more embarrassing than anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and so he pushes you towards Warne in a way of I don't know if they have this in other places, but certainly it's a big thing in Australia and a little bit in England. That sort of, after dinner speaking circuit.
Yeah.
I've been to dinners, and Gatting he's just there with the Warne thing, from beginning to end. He's literally got a tight 7 minutes on the Warne ball that he can rip out at any stage and just nail it. Like you could see him on the tube in the morning, right? And he'd be like, "Okay, I've got 8 minutes till my tube comes. I'll give you the story. Bang, let's go." And he really does have that. But realistically, weirdly enough, like Strauss and Gibbs aren't really defined by their balls at all, and yet their balls are. As I said before, they should have known that this was coming, right? That's the thing. But it just the way it opened Gibbs up and then opens South Africa up. And if I'm trying to remember, I'm pretty sure Hunter Cronje doesn't even hit his one to Mark Waugh. Warne is spinning the ball so much by that stage. I reckon Cronje either hit the ground or missed it altogether.
That's
it goes
right.
to slip. Yeah. And it's the umpire, everyone is just on Shane Warne at this point. And they are just rolling towards victory. And then Callis and Jonty Rhodes put together a really good partnership.
Yeah.
And suddenly they get close, but they're just a little bit behind the game at that point.
Yeah, that's right. And so Warne gets Callis and Rifle gets Rhodes, and then it all starts to get interesting. Pollock hangs around he's 20 off 14, so that's but then when Lance Klusener comes in, and there's always that debate. I mean, since we're talking about it in detail, I'll say it, but there's always that debate: why didn't Klusener bat higher? And we talked about it before. He averaged 140 in that tournament, right? And he wasn't. I know at that stage they really were pushing the whole Sean Pollock is the next great all-rounder thing. Which, to be fair to Polly, I don't think ever quite happened. And he was a very handy bat, but he was never at that level. But surely at that point, it doesn't matter, even if you think Sean Pollock is going to be a great player for the next 10 years. Lance Klusener literally at that stage had a strike rate of over 100 and a batting average of probably over 100. You just put him in. The minute Callis goes out, you just send him in, don't you? That's right. It's like it's in the most recent series. Stark's batting well, so Cummins puts him ahead of him. It's just... So anyway, so Klusener comes in at 8 after Pollock. And so then it's just like, holy shit. It is the most savage hitting you've ever seen. And Boucher, so once Fleming gets Pollock, Boucher doesn't hang around long. He gets bowled by McGrath, and then there's the Elworthy run out.
Do you know Do you know what Steve Elworthy is now? Did you?
I heard an interview with him. I'm sorry. What is he now?
So Steve Elworthy is now the guy who plans the World Cups.
Oh my God.
So I'm trying to think. He didn't do 2007, and they had a shocker, the ICC. And I don't know how Elworthy ended up in the position, but he's working for the ECB, and he starts organising. So he does most of the tournaments go through him. I think he might have just left the ICC recently. I think that's right. I can't remember the exact details, but basically, Steve Elworthy, who for us is this kind of figure. I mean, we go back to the start. We're talking about Alan Donald not taking the new ball. It was Steve Elworthy who took the new ball, who none of us had any idea who this bloke was.
Yeah.
He was, in my memory of him, he was grey-haired and pale thin back then, and he's exactly the same now. He once bowled me out in a charity game, so he's still a little bit too quick for the likes of you and me. Went straight through me. In fact, he got me for a second ball duck, and I saw him sort of look at me as if to go, this guy's a cricket writer, he's shit. And then I went out and bowled, and I took 3 wickets. And afterwards, he goes, "Oh, you've got a bit. You must be a bowler." And I was like, "Yeah, Steve. Yeah, not much for the batting, not much for that." But he's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But I saw it so funny. He's so famous for being in a World Cup, and now he's the one. He's the guy who plans them and makes sure that they all work.
That's great.
So he gets run out by Rifle and McGrath, and so you then have Alan Donald batting at 11 with Lance Klusener. And this is the point at which. Did you watch all the games, you like me, or were you just watching Australia?
I pretty much watched Australia because I don't think all the. You correct me if I'm wrong. Were all the games on Channel 9? I don't think so.
No, I don't think they were. I think there were like extended replays. Than live event. Yeah,
I remember being on the Zimbabwe bandwagon. Like I remember like just loving that and just like hoping they'd make the semis. But that was before. That was when I was feeling all generous. I started to get like real, when you feel like cabin fever and locked in. When after that, I think it was the New Zealand game? No, the Pakistan game where we had to win everything. I went, no, fuck everyone else. Let's just get to the Super Sixes.
Yeah, I can't remember if I watched it all, or just because almost every ball of Lance Klusener was a boundary, and so every highlight you saw was him. But I felt by that point he was like the Darth Vader figure of that World Cup for Australia because he was just so big and so strong, and it felt like there was like entrance music when he came out. And so we talked about the like, as I said, the Australians were put off by him. Like they were watching this guy whacking balls 120 meters in centre wicket practice and going, "We can't do that, right?" And
he's making McGrath look silly.
Yeah. And his bat looked 3 times heavier than anyone else's bat, and he was also from a technical point of view. He's the first guy that ever worked out how to hit. Well, he's the first guy who ever worked out how to consistently hit Yorkers for 4, right? So you had someone like Bevan, who if you bowled a slightly wide Yorker, Bevan would like slice him away, and Arjuna Rantunga would slice him away. But it's like, it didn't matter if it was a leg stump Yorker or whatever. Klusener was just like, if I drop my bat on this, my bat's so heavy, it's going for 4 anyway, right? And so you think, as an Australian, you're thinking, how the fuck are they going to get past him?
It was like you given up, and you that McGrath over. I think it was that second last over. That was the catch to Rifle that went for 6, and then it just to rub salt into the wounds. So Donald's in. So you talk about the Sorry, just to backtrack a bit. You talk about the music when Klusener comes in, the Darth Vader music. So it's definitely some sort of like Benny Hill thing when Donald comes in, because he's looking around. It's like, I shouldn't be here. This is too intense. I've never seen, even from my television, I've never seen such fear on the face of anyone, really. And it's
remarkable because by that point, Alan Donald is already probably the most famous player they've had since readmission. He had dominated English cricket. He'd won 1 million. I don't know how much you know about Warwickshire, but they won all the titles when he played for them, right?
Yeah,
because they had Alan Donald. But they also had a great team around him. He was used to playing in, televised games in TV. He played for South Africa, right? And he was a great player already by that point in his career. But you're right. You look at him in that thing and you're just like, it's like he feels. There's a great story about Alan Donald in a one-dayer where he was commentating with Neil Manthorpe because there was no secondary commentator. So Neil Manthorpe had to get someone from the change room. And Alan Donald's going, yeah, we've lost a couple of wickets here. And then he stops and he says to Neil Manthorpe, oh shit, I better go. I think I've got a bat next. Right? That's what he looks like in that game, right? Where he's suddenly sitting there reading the paper going, well, I'm a bit nervous. I don't want to... I've got to go in and somehow help us get to the World Cup. but World Cup final. But the thing is, from that last over, they needed 9 from 6.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I mean, for me and for you, watching as Australians all the way back, it was like Klusener ended that game at the start of that over.
Yeah. That's right. It was so the plan to Klusener for the death was to bowl those to bowl around the wicket, for Fleming to bowl around the wicket and bowl those kind of like Yorkers outside off stump, and Donald just like dispatched the first 2 for 4, just simple. It was a tie, so they had 4 balls just to get 1 run, and then Fleming said to Waugh, "I'm abandoning the plan. Can I abandon the plan and go back over the wicket?" And Waugh went, "Yeah, I guess. I mean, what harm is there in just trying something new?" And because like Fleming always says, to Steve's credit, he said that I could do it. And I'm thinking, well, it's not. What else is he going to say? So yeah, Fleming then goes over the wicket, and that's when Klusener clips it to Lehmann. And what was the running situation there? Did Donald back up too far, and then Lehmann shot at the stumps and missed?
Yes, yeah, he had like an underarm shot, didn't he?
Yeah, and he just missed. It was like, and I remember Fleming in one interview just saying, everyone was a bit down on Buff because we're into the World Cup final because even though just for those playing at home, we had a higher run rate than South Africa, so a tie would put us through to the final.
Yeah, and so Lehmann obviously not known for his fielding or his physical exploits, but I think you're right. What had happened is clearly Klusener and Donald had not had a proper normal human conversation at this point because Donald just sort of takes off, and Klusener's thinking, I've got 3 balls left, and so Donald is 2 meters when he turns around, and the ball's gone straight to Lehmann. Also, to be fair to Donald, Lehmann's a left-hander, and so it's possible that he just saw, that's gone to the right-hander of a fielder. To the left-hander of a fielder will take off. But either way, I don't think there was that much going on in Donald. I think I'm being overly kind to Donald at that particular point. So he doesn't get the run out. What then should have happened is they should have gone down and had a lengthy conversation of exactly what their plan was for the next ball, the ball after, and then worst case scenario, the last ball. That doesn't appear to have really happened.
No. The thing, what happens next, again, it's like that West Indies semi-final. It's like, what? For me, I've watched it many, many, many times since, and it all makes sense to me now. But at the time, it made no sense to me. So Fleming bowls, Klusener clips it to Mark Waugh.
Yeah, Mark Waugh at mid-on. So the first one was to mid-on, second one was to Mark Waugh at mid-off. Sorry.
Yeah, mid-off. And Waugh, and then so Donald is fucking not going anywhere because what happened the previous ball was like, there you go. It's like so hating himself for what he did, backing up so far. So he's just like, no, I'm putting that bat in my crease. Meanwhile, Klusener is just ploughing down the pitch. Waugh throws it to the bowler's end stumps. Do we think that maybe he was going for those stumps, but he missed? Fleming collects it, underarms it to Gilchrist. Meanwhile, he's not coming back. He's not going back into his crease. That Donald takes off, drops his bat, and just sprints. Like Gallipoli. You know that last scene in Gallipoli where they're just running? That's what Donald's doing. And Gilly makes no mistake, collects and pulls down the stumps. But there's a really interesting bit in where Tim Lane was commentating at the radio, and they had this deal that whoever, I don't know who he's commentating with. It was a South African commentator, and the deal was that whatever team went through the World Cup, that person would call it. So, Tim Lane was just sitting back in his seat. He was like, "Oh, we've lost this," and then suddenly he had to kind of take over the call. And Australia through the World Cup final. I mean, I was on the phone to a mate. We were watching the last five overs together, and riding the emotion of that. And then I just remember being on the floor screaming into the phone, and it was possibly the greatest moment of my life to that point. It was.
I remember going in. So it must have been 3 or 4 in the morning, Melbourne time.
Yeah.
And I remember running into my dad's bedroom and screaming and trying to explain it, and him looking at me like I was speaking another language because he hated ODI cricket, and it was only after that period he ever watched any of it. And him going, "It's a fucking one day. I don't give a shit." And I was like, "No, you have to understand what happened. You have to understand what happened." But I didn't know what had happened because I'd just been in the other room watching everything. And I remember trying to explain to him that Lance Klusener couldn't turn around, and him looking at me at 4 a.m. whatever it was, going, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
That's
right?
brilliant. That's fucking brilliant. Yeah. It was, and we had no. I mean, unless you're just recording it on your VHS. I mean, how would you have played it back to your dad? It was, and it lived on in our minds for a long time because I don't even know if YouTube was a thing back then. I don't remember getting a chance to see it for years. And
you saw it weirdly, like the way that, remember they used to show that, Sports Tonight and all those sorts of things. You'd see it, but they wouldn't show the full context. And then importantly, you didn't see the rifle drop and you needed the rifle drop and the two boundaries to really understand how much South Africa were on top at that point. And then the Lehman throw at the stumps. And Australia looks broken when Lehman's throw misses, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the bit that was always missing to me. It's like, you get the comedy run out and everyone blames Donald. And it's like, Donald shouldn't have been out there. Donald didn't know what he was doing. And Klusener clearly did not tell Donald he was going to run no matter what on that ball. And he also hit it to I know, Ponting was the best fielder in Australia at that point. But he hit it to the second best fielder in Australia and one of the best fielders in the world in my ball.
Yeah. It's and the calmest head too, by the way. That
we haven't even talked about Damien Fleming actually rolling the ball on the ground. That's like where like I'm trying to think. You only see that in cricket when someone panics and they don't know what else to do.
That's yes. Yes, it was like there's so many ways it could have gone wrong as well, and it just didn't. And just before that ball, you saw there was a shot that the telecast has a shot of Warne looking like the saddest man in the world. It's just like, I've done all this. I've just bowled the best 10 overs of ODI bowling probably in the history of the game, and we're going to fucking lose. Fuck you guys. You should have had me captain. You shouldn't have dropped me in the 4th test against the West Indies. And then you just see Warne and Warne just like that. They're looking at each other, and there's a still shot of them about to hug, and you kind of go, it is interesting because you're a fan of the game. I'm a fan of the game. You know kind of the background, and you know the enmity between certain players and everything. But I love it when it all dissolves for those moments where they, when something good happens and they, no, fuck it, and then for that moment they're friends again, and they'll resume hostilities when they get back to the sheds. But that moment is everything's forgiven.
But the other great thing about that is that I sort of mentioned it before, but that is the moment that starts the South African choking story, right?
Yeah.
And yet Australia choked just as hard. In fact, I would say that other than the first 3 wickets of Warne, right? So when they're number 48, South Africa's in front, no doubt about that. But for the rest of the game, until Klusener hits those 2 fours, Australia's massively ahead in that game. They've always got South Africa behind the rate. They're struggling. I think one of the reasons they didn't send Klusener in is they probably thought that Pollock was just a bit more polished, and it was such a high-pressure situation. They were a little bit behind the game. They made problems with their tactics. But Australia missed the catch, missed the run out, and then Fleming gets hit for 2 fours in a row. Like, Australia absolutely shit the bed for about 4 or 5 balls in a row, and it just happened to be that for 2 balls then South Africa did worse.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, you'd have to say, we say this a lot. We make the point, make the point a lot with different cricketers, but it was definitely a kind of a, it portended to what T20 cricket would become. Watching Klusener, bat,
Yeah.
and you just whatever the target was a lot less when he was batting, because you just thought he could just envelop it very quickly. But yeah, so we won, and they learned from the '96 World Cup. No one got horribly pissed. I think there was just a few drinks in the hotel after the game, but it was more like looking at each other. Did that all just happen? Did that really happen? And the Pakistan final was a fizzer.
Yeah, I mean, my memory of that was, and it's weird because Pakistan had beaten us early in the tournament, but my memory of that was that I don't remember being worried going into that game. I was very worried going into the semi-final. I thought South Africa could definitely beat us in the semi-final. And then, obviously, that game is over so early when when Mark Waugh takes the flying slips catch. Like, almost from that moment onwards, you're just like, well, this is over. And it was actually probably because, as you said before, two of the greatest one-day games back-to-back ever. And then the final was just terrible, and Pakistan didn't turn up. And Pakistan had a very weird tournament because they beat Australia early on, but they lost to Bangladesh in that tournament, and that's why Bangladesh got test status. So Bangladesh had 2 wins in that tournament. They beat Scotland, who at that stage Scotland were the favourites to get the next test gig, and they beat Pakistan in a game that some people may assume not everything went completely as it should have. But either way, Pakistan had this very weird tournament, and they had a great team. They had the 2 all-rounders, they had Azam Mahmood and Abdul Razak, who don't go on to be greats. But back in those days, I remember being, look at these guys. They just come in and slog it, and they've got slower balls, and they both, and Abdul Razak was so stylish. He was like the Pakistani Mark Waugh. And then they get to the final, and it just all fell apart. And I just remember having this letdown of like, you can't give me 2 great games like that. Even the Neil Johnson game, if you want to go back to the Zimbabwe one, it just felt like everything was great, and then that final just sort of fizzled. Yeah,
well, it's like if you look at that. This is all memory going now, but if you look at that Australia-Pakistan, the first game, it was an overcast day, very low cloud cover, and that's where Akram was just getting all that kind of swing. Again, this is memory. The final was sunny day, beautiful sunny day, and I just don't think the conditions played to Pakistan at all. But I mean, who would have cared? I mean, they made 132 in the first innings, so it wasn't really relevant, I guess.
No, I mean, they just got behind so early, didn't they? At that point, and it's just. I mean, interesting. I'm trying to remember. I mean, they had Syed Anwar, Ijaz Ahmed, Inzamam al-Haq, Moeen Khan, Shahid Afridi, Azam Mahmood, Wasam Akram, Sakleh Mushtaq, and Shoaib Akhtar. The level of talent, one-day talent in that particular tournament. And I don't know if it's because we didn't have as many good teams. Maybe, it just felt like... But that particular tournament feels that if you just look at the, top maybe 3 or 4 11s, just phenomenal players that came right across it. And it was, in some ways, the 92 World Cup is the most remembered for some, because it changed the game. 96, obviously, because of what Sri Lanka did. And, there's quite a few, 2011... But realistically, it's like that 99 World Cup, just for the players and the cricket, is just so memorable.
It really is. And you're a Collingwood fan, so do you remember, I think it was in the 2002 Granny when Buckley won the Norm Smith, and he goes on stage and he gets it, and then he rips it off. He's really upset, because this is not the medal I wanted. And so when Klusener gets player of the series. So Australia win against Pakistan, obviously. Klusener gets player of the series. The most upset man you've ever, more upset than Warne was. He's furious. He's furious. And by the way, we've mentioned Donald before. Every interview that Klusener does, he's so careful to go into bat for Donald and say it wasn't his responsibility. If the top 6 had done their job, we would have got this done. We would have got this done. Because Donald would have just caught so much heat over that, and particularly with the drop bat and everything, but the comical nature of him getting out. I think it's really important that Klusener does that, and I think it's great that he does that. Not Donald's job in those days anyway. We didn't put such pressure on bowlers to be able to, bat their way out of bad situations.
So for you, your career, we're talking about you as a journalist, and obviously you've gone on to do, much more than interview Sting. Not that that's not an accomplishment, man, but
no.
You've gone on to do, so much more. Why flicking through the book, what the 99 World Cup seems a very important time in your life, right? Like that period, maybe from there to about 2001 seems like a real hedge point. When you were writing this, do you sort of taken back to how you felt? Weirdly for me, because you mentioned Regurgitator and because it was 99 World Cup, there's a lot of things, and the Herald Sun, and you talk about Carlton Football Club and all those sorts of things from my youth that I'm now even more, you'd be shocked to know not that many people over here get Regurgitator references when I know. So I suppose, for you, that seemed like a really, really, like a hinge moment in your life.
Oh, it was a very interesting year because you're a Victorian. So, there's the 99 prelim, which is big for Carlton against Essendon. And then that same night, Melbourne Storm beat Parramatta in a ridiculously unexpected way to get into the grand final of the 99 NRL grand final. And Steve Bracks beat Kennett in a shock election win. So that I remember that was the those three things happened on that night in, I guess it was September '99. But and then this happened beforehand, the World Cup. It was such an interesting year in everything where things did get turned on their heads. I mean, South Africa should have won. South Africa were bulletproof going into that tournament. They should have won. There's something else that we've missed that that Trevor Hohns did say to Steve Waugh just after the Pakistan game: if you don't make the semis, you're gone as captain. I mean, Trevor Hohns had a lot of those conversations with Steve Waugh. I mean, it's like he just looks like the angel of death. I remember there was that bit I put in the book where Trevor wanted to tell Waugh that he'd been dumped from the one-day team, and he wanted to do it at Launceston in an ODI between New South Wales and Tasmania, and he goes up and goes, "Can we?" He goes up to Waugh, who's padded up, ready to go in, and he says, "Do you mind if we have a chat about your future?" And Waugh goes, "I'm about to go into bat. Can we do it tomorrow?" But in Hohns' defence, he thought that was the right time to do it. He thought it was kind of a little bit insensitive to do it the next day, which was the Allan Border Medal. He didn't want to spoil Waugh's Allan Border Medal. Anyway, there's as we know with the Langer thing, there's no good time to break any news.
Why did you write your memoirs around cricket writing? Because I know you've made the documentary, but you're not really known for your cricket stuff as much as you're known for comedy and Wilfred and all those sorts of things.
It's really interesting. So for the original reason was that I just went through my life and everything that's happened, and cricket's always been the banister that I've held on to, to keep me going through the dark times. So it also helps me remember what's happened. So I know, I remember the 99 World Cup. I remember a relationship going really bad at the time, but not caring because 99 World Cup. So those things that I remember, 2001, the India series, my mum being really sick. I remember 2005 Ashes. I had a play on that, about cricket called The Inner Sanctum in Melbourne that did really well, and that Border and Taylor and Tony Doddermaid saw, which is one of the highlights of my life. Yeah. It's like I remember Doddermaid just looking at me. I know I'm not Border or Taylor, but I'm going fucking Tony Doddermaid. I'm a huge fan. So that was always there. Now, what I wanted to do to differentiate myself from you guys, or Bredick or any of those other cricket writers, is this comes from more of a romantic point of view. This is an emotional point of view. This is not a boffin's point of view, although I did take a lot of care to get everything right. I wanted to separate myself. I didn't want to, I'm not Pete Lawler. I'm not Gideon Haigh. I don't, this is not my profession. For me, it's not a kind of a dry thing that I analyze and write about in a kind of impartial way. No. I'm a big Australia fan. It's Australia first for me, cricket second. I just love the green and gold. So, although I'll sit and watch any cricket match, for me, I'm a very one-eyed supporter. So, it harks back to Nick Hornby fever pitch and writing about Arsenal. That's where that's it. This is not. Don't confuse me for a proper cricket writer who's with kind of like sober views on the game and everything. No. I'm a fan.
Well, I mean, I still feel that way, and I'm supposed to probably not be like that. But thank you very much for coming on the podcast, mate.
Jarrod, thanks. That was great. I'd love talking about all that. Thank you so much for getting me on.